On my wedding day, my stepsister ran in screaming, "Stop the wedding. He belongs to me." My fiancé looked at her and then turned to me, expecting me to break down. But instead I smiled and said, "I was waiting for this moment." Then I pulled out a letter that made everyone gasp. I'd always known Madison would try to steal my happiness. She'd been rehearsing for this moment since the day I got engaged. What she didn't know was that I'd been preparing too, and her own words were about to become her undoing. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to thank each of you for being part of this incredible journey. If you're enjoying these stories of empowerment, consider subscribing. It's completely free and helps us build this amazing community. Let's dive in. Growing up with Madison Blake Clark wasn't just challenging, it was an education in survival. From the moment her father Robert married my mother Diana, Madison made it her mission to take everything I cherished. At first it was small things, borrowing my favorite sweater only to accidentally ruin it, or telling my friends about embarrassing moments that never actually happened. But as we got older, her games became more calculated, more cruel. During college, she dated not one but 3 of my boyfriends, waiting until things got serious before swooping in with her perfectly practiced damsel in distress routine. Each time she'd flash that innocent smile and say, "It just happened, Eve. You can't blame love, can you?" But everything changed the night I met Alexander Winchester III at the Metropolitan Museum Charity Gala. I was there representing my company. He was the evening's keynote speaker. Madison had been invited but called in sick at the last minute, something she'd regret for years to come. When Alex and I connected over our shared passion for educational reform, neither of us could have predicted how the night would unfold. The first diary appeared 3 months after our engagement. I'd gone to Mother's house to help with spring cleaning when I found it tucked behind Madison's old vanity, a plain black leather journal filled with pages of her increasingly obsessive thoughts. "Alex deserves someone who understands his world," she'd written. "Eve's just a charity case who got lucky. I've seen how he looks at me during family dinners. He knows he chose wrong." I didn't confront her then. Instead I watched, waited, and discovered more. Each new diary revealed darker intentions, detailed plans, and a fantasy world where she and Alex lived the perfect life she believed she deserved. My stepsister wasn't just jealous, she was unraveling. My best friend Olivia thought I should expose Madison immediately, but I knew better. "Let her plan," I told Olivia one afternoon over coffee. "Every word she writes is another nail in her own coffin." The wedding preparations became Madison's stage. As maid of honor, her idea not mine, she attended every fitting, tasting, and planning session. While she played the supportive sister in public, her diaries told a different story. She'd write for hours about how the Vera Wang dress should have been hers, how she could better handle Alex's family wealth, how she'd redecorate the Winchester estate once she'd saved Alex from his mistake. I kept Alex informed of everything. He was shocked at first. The Madison he knew seemed so sweet, so caring. But as I showed him diary after diary, he understood. Together we created a plan. We let her overhear false wedding details, watched her scramble to adjust her schemes, and waited for her to dig herself deeper. The day before the wedding, I found her final diary entry. "Tomorrow everything changes," she'd written. "I've practiced my speech 100 times. The red dress is perfect, it'll make sure all eyes are on me. Eve thinks she's won, but she has no idea what's coming. By this time tomorrow, Alex will finally be mine." So when those cathedral doors burst open and Madison strode in wearing that carefully chosen red dress, I didn't flinch. When she screamed about true love and destiny, I didn't cry. And when Alex turned to me with practiced concern, I simply smiled and reached for the letter I'd prepared, a carefully curated collection of her most damning diary entries. The gasps echoed through the cathedral as I read excerpts of her own words aloud. Madison's face transformed from triumphant to horrified as she recognized her private thoughts being broadcast to 500 of Boston's finest. Her mask cracked, then shattered completely when I reached the final entry, the one detailing exactly how she'd planned to destroy my wedding day. She ran from the cathedral, mascara streaming down her face, leaving behind the wreckage of her own making. Mother tried to follow, but I gently stopped her. "She made her choice," I said softly. "Now she has to live with it." Alex squeezed my hand as we turned back to the officiant. The ceremony continued, more beautiful for having survived its trial by fire. Later, during our first dance, Alex whispered, "I never doubted you for a second. I looked over his shoulder at the empty table where Madison should have been sitting. I know, I replied. That's exactly why she never stood a chance. The weeks following my wedding revealed the true depth of Madison's obsession. While I honeymooned in the Maldives with Alex, she spiraled further into her carefully constructed fantasy world, one that became painfully clear as more of her diaries surfaced. Looking back, our parallel lives had always been a study in contrast. We shared the same elegant colonial home after our parents married, but while I spent nights studying under my desk lamp, Madison posed before her mirror, practicing society smiles. When I launched my tech startup, she launched Instagram stories about luxury lifestyle tips. Our paths diverged but remained inexplicably tangled. The diary entries from her teenage years were almost innocent in their jealousy. "Eve got into Harvard today," she'd written. "Daddy says Yale is just as good, but everyone knows Harvard's more prestigious. She probably only got in because of her sob story about losing her father." Each page dripped with similar petty resentments, cataloging every perceived slight and advantage. But it was her observations about wealth that truly revealed her character. While I built my company from the ground up, Madison cultivated an expertise in designer labels and luxury experiences, all funded by her father's guilt-driven generosity. "Eve doesn't understand old money," one entry sneered. "She thinks success is about spreadsheets and innovations. But I know what really matters: the right connections, the right image, the right life." The day I met Alex at the charity gala became an obsession in her diaries. Pages upon pages dissected every detail she'd heard secondhand: how I wore a basic blue gown while she lay in bed with a convenient flu, how Alex and I connected over our shared passion for educational technology, how the evening should have been her triumph. "Eve doesn't deserve him," she'd scrawled frantically. "She can't appreciate what it means to be a Winchester. I grew up understanding wealth, learning the social graces she'll never master. Alex needs someone who belongs in his world. Someone like me." The wedding planning became her personal torment. Each diary entry from that period reads like a study in delusional thinking. She'd sketch herself in my wedding gown, practice signing Madison Winchester in flowing script, and detail elaborate scenarios where Alex would realize his mistake. Her maid of honor role became a front-row seat to what she viewed as an elaborate charade. "Watched Eve stumble through another etiquette lesson today," she wrote after a formal dinner with Alex's family. "She used the wrong fork for her salad, but everyone pretended not to notice. They're too polite to admit what a mistake Alex is making. But I see the way his mother Victoria winces at Eve's common manners. I could save them all from this embarrassment." What Madison never realized was that her precious diary entries about my social faux pas only endeared me further to the Winchesters. Victoria herself came across one of the journals Madison had accidentally left in the family estate's library. Instead of being horrified by my alleged missteps, Alex's mother was appalled by Madison's obsessive documentation of them. "Your stepsister," Victoria told me over tea one afternoon, "seems to have forgotten that true grace lies in making others feel comfortable, not in counting their mistakes." Coming from Boston's reigning social queen, this validation meant everything. The final diary, the one that sealed Madison's fate, revealed her plan to save Alex from our marriage. She detailed everything: the red dress chosen to outshine my wedding gown, the tearful speech practiced 100 times, even the exact moment she'd make her dramatic entrance. "Everyone will see it's meant to be," she'd written. "All those society magazines will call it Boston's greatest love story." Instead, those same magazines ran very different headlines. "Wedding interrupted. Diary reveals desperate plot" became the talk of the social season. Madison fled to Europe, unable to face the humiliation of having her own words exposed to the very society she'd tried so desperately to impress. Mother still forwards her occasional emails, postcards from Paris, photos from Milan, each one carefully curated to show she's thriving. But her latest diary, discovered in her abandoned apartment and forwarded by her former roommate, tells a different story. "They'll never understand," she wrote. "I could have been everything Eve pretends to be. I knew the rules, played the game, did everything right. So why does she keep winning?" The answer, of course, was simple: I never played her game at all. While Madison crafted elaborate schemes in her diaries, I built a life based on something real. Alex and I recently launched an educational technology foundation, bringing innovative learning tools to underserved communities. It's not the society life Madison dreamed of, but it's something far more valuable. It's authentic. Sometimes I wonder if she'll ever understand that her own words set me free. Those diaries didn't just expose her plot. They released me from a lifetime of walking on eggshells. In trying to write herself into my story, Madison finally wrote herself out of it completely. 6 months after the wedding, a mysterious package arrived at our doorstep. Inside, I found another of Madison's diaries, this one sent by her former therapist, Dr. Sarah Bennett, who'd broken confidentiality after discovering the disturbing extent of my stepsister's obsession. The diary's pages revealed a methodical investigation I'd never known about. Madison had hired private investigators to track my daily routines, paid off service staff at Alex's favorite restaurants to report our conversations, and even attempted to hack my business emails. Each entry meticulously documented her findings like a detective's case file, but with a disturbing personal twist. Eve's schedule is predictable, she'd written. Coffee at La Maison at 7:15 a.m. office by 8. She thinks being punctual makes her professional, but it just makes her boring. Alex deserves someone spontaneous, someone exciting. Someone like me. Dr. Bennett's accompanying letter explained how Madison had spent their sessions not seeking help, but instead justifying her actions. I'm protecting Alex, she'd insist. Eve's fooled everyone with her self-made success story, but I know she's just using him for his money and connections. I have proof. The proof filled dozens of pages, innocent business meetings twisted into suspected affairs, charitable donations portrayed as tax schemes, and routine phone calls transformed into elaborate conspiracies. My stepsister hadn't just been planning to stop a wedding. She'd been building an entire false narrative about my life. What struck me most was the detailed timeline she'd created, counting down to my wedding day. Each entry became increasingly frantic as the date approached. 90 days until I save Alex. Ordered the red dress today. It's perfect for making a dramatic entrance. The color symbolizes passion, love, destiny. Eve's boring white dress won't stand a chance. 60 days left. Practice my speech again. Stop the wedding. He belongs to me. The mirror says I'm getting better at the tears. They need to look real for maximum impact. 30 days to go. Overheard Eve discussing seating arrangements. I'll position myself perfectly, 3rd row left side. The acoustics in the cathedral will carry my voice to every corner. Everyone will remember this moment. But it was the final entry, dated just hours before the wedding, that truly chilled me. Dear diary, by the time I write in you again, everything will be different. I've memorized every detail. The exact moment to stand, the precise words to say, the perfect expression of desperate love. Eve thinks she knows what's coming, but she has no idea. After today, Alex will finally see the truth, and I'll have everything I deserve. The irony of her words wasn't lost on me. Madison had been right about one thing. I had known what was coming. But her obsession with creating the perfect dramatic moment had blinded her to the fact that she was writing her own downfall, one diary entry at a time. Alex took the discovery of this latest diary harder than I did. She wasn't just trying to stop our wedding, he said, pacing our library one evening. She was trying to destroy your reputation, your credibility, everything you've built. I placed the diary alongside the others we'd collected, a disturbing chronicle of obsession now safely locked away in our home. But she failed, I reminded him. Because she was so focused on writing about destroying my life, she never actually lived her own. Dr. Bennett's professional assessment confirmed what we'd suspected. Madison's jealousy had evolved into an elaborate fantasy world where she was the hero of a story that existed only in her diaries. Each entry reinforced her delusions, creating a spiral of obsession that ultimately led to her public downfall. The most recent updates from Europe suggest Madison has finally begun real therapy. Mother says she's showing signs of genuine reflection, though the path to healing will be long. Her last postcard, unlike the previous carefully curated messages, simply read, "I'm sorry. I'm getting help." Sometimes late at night I revisit those diaries, not out of anger or triumph, but as a reminder of how easily obsession can consume a life. Madison spent years writing about destroying my happiness, but in doing so she only documented her own unraveling. The final page of her last diary remains the most poignant. Beneath her detailed plans for wedding disruption, written in a shaky hand, was a single line she probably never meant anyone to read. Why can't I just be happy for her? That question, more than any of her elaborate schemes or accusations, reveals the true tragedy of Madison's story. In trying to write herself into my life, she forgot to live her own. Her diaries became both her weapon and her prison, a paper trail that ultimately led not to the triumph she imagined, but to the help she truly needed. A year into our marriage, Alex and I decided to renovate the east wing of the Winchester estate. During the cleanup, we discovered something unexpected behind a false panel in Madison's old room, a hidden cache of diaries dating back to our childhood. These weren't like her other journals. These were her raw, unfiltered thoughts, never meant to be found. The discovery coincided perfectly with my plan. For months, I'd been strategically feeding Madison false information through our family network. Each carefully planted detail about Alex's and my supposed marital troubles reached her like breadcrumbs, leading her exactly where I wanted her to go. Eve's business is struggling, Mother would casually mention during their weekly calls. She's been asking Alex for investment capital. Or Olivia would deliberately let slip at social gatherings that Alex and I were sleeping in separate bedrooms. Each piece of misinformation found its way into Madison's new diary entries, which her former roommate Charlotte faithfully forwarded to me. The setup was meticulous. I made sure to be seen arguing with Alex in public places where Madison's remaining society friends would witness it. We scheduled separate vacation plans, dropped hints about couples counseling, and let rumors circulate about potential divorce attorneys being consulted. Madison took the bait completely. Her latest diary entries vibrated with renewed hope. Eve's finally showing her true colors. Alex must see now what a mistake he made. Their marriage is crumbling exactly as I predicted. Soon he'll realize I was right all along. What she didn't know was that every move was orchestrated. Alex and I were never stronger, our public arguments, carefully scripted performances. The separate vacations were business trips coordinated to align with our expansion plans. Even the couples counseling rumors were part of a charity initiative we'd launched for relationship wellness. Victoria Winchester, Alex's mother, proved an unexpected ally in our scheme. Madison never understood that real society isn't about being seen, she remarked one afternoon over tea. It's about seeing through others' facades. She helped us plant several key pieces of misinformation through her extensive social network. The hidden childhood diaries revealed something crucial: Madison's first attempts to imitate my life. Pages filled with copied homework assignments, traced signatures, even lists of my favorite things with notes on how to make them her own. This pattern of mimicry had started long before her obsession with Alex. We waited until the perfect moment to spring our trap. At the annual Winchester Foundation Gala, we knew Madison would make her move. She'd been writing frantically about her triumphant return to society for weeks. Her diary detailed every aspect, from her designer gown to the exact moment she'd approach Alex. The evening unfolded exactly as planned. Madison arrived looking radiant, carefully timing her entrance for maximum impact. She circulated gracefully, gathering sympathy with carefully crafted hints about her emotional recovery abroad. Then, just as her diary had predicted, she approached Alex during a quiet moment on the terrace. What she didn't expect was my presence around the corner, or the stack of her childhood diaries in my hands. As she began her practice speech about understanding and forgiveness, I stepped forward. Looking for something familiar, Madison? Something to copy, perhaps? The color drained from her face as I began reading entries from her hidden diaries, decades of attempted identity theft laid bare. Each page revealed her systematic attempts to become me, long before Alex entered our lives. Her sophisticated society mask cracked completely when I reached the entries about practicing my handwriting, memorizing my mannerisms, even using my old perfume. You never wanted Alex, I said softly, closing the final diary. You wanted my life, and he was just the latest piece you tried to take. The gathered crowd of Boston's elite witnessed her second public unraveling, but this time there was no dramatic exit. Instead, Madison sank into a nearby chair, all pretense abandoned. How did you always know? She whispered. Because you wrote everything down, I replied. Every plan, every scheme, every attempt to become me. The only thing you never wrote was your own story. This time, when Madison left Boston, it wasn't in disgrace but in defeat. The childhood diaries had exposed something far deeper than jealousy, They revealed a lifetime of trying to live someone else's life instead of creating her own. Alex wrapped his arm around me as we watched her car disappear down the winding driveway. Do you think she'll ever find herself? I tucked the last diary into my evening bag, finally closing this chapter of our lives. She has to stop writing about others first. Some stories need to end before new ones can begin. 2 years after the gala incident, Madison's digital footprint began telling a new story. Her once pristine Instagram feed, carefully curated to mirror my life, transformed into something unexpectedly authentic. Gone were the posed photos at luxury venues and calculated recreations of my business milestones. Instead, she started sharing glimpses of a simpler life in a small town outside Paris. Charlotte, who still maintained occasional contact with her, forwarded me Madison's latest diary, this one different from all the others. Instead of leather-bound elegance, it was a simple notebook filled with watercolor sketches and reflections on her art therapy sessions. I spent so many years trying to be Eve, she'd written, that I forgot who Madison was supposed to be. Today, I painted my first original piece without checking anyone else's social media for inspiration. It's messy and imperfect, but it's mine. The transformation wasn't instantaneous or complete. Some entries still revealed old habits. Saw Eve's new tech company expansion announcement. For a moment I started planning, but then I picked up my paintbrush instead. Progress, it seemed, came in small strokes. Alex noticed the change first in the family holiday cards. Madison's annual carefully staged photos were replaced by candid shots of her teaching art to children at a local community center. She's finally writing her own story, he observed, studying the genuine smile that had replaced her practiced society grin. Mother began sharing more frequent updates about Madison's new life. She'd rented a tiny studio apartment above a bakery, far from the luxury condos she once insisted were essential. Her new diary entries focused on morning conversations with the elderly baker below, the changing colors of sane sunsets, and the liberation of creating without competition. I found one of my old diaries today, she wrote. Pages and pages about Eve's success, Alex's wealth, the life I thought I deserved. It feels like reading about a stranger. Someone so consumed by another person's story that she forgot to live at all. The real breakthrough came when Madison started her own small business. Not a glossy tech startup like mine, but a cozy art therapy studio helping others find their authentic voice through creativity. Her diary entries now filled with stories of her students' breakthroughs rather than schemes for social climbing. Today a young girl reminded me of myself. One entry read. She kept looking at other students' paintings, trying to copy their style. I showed her my old diary entries, my own journey from imitation to authenticity. For the first time I felt grateful for my past, not because of what I gained, but because of what I could teach others about losing yourself in someone else's life. Victoria Winchester, who had once been Madison's harshest critic, surprised everyone by commissioning a series of paintings for the Winchester Foundation's new youth center. True grace, she told me, lies in recognizing genuine transformation. Madison's work, abstract expressions of personal growth, now hangs in the very halls where she once plotted her social ascension. The most telling change appeared in her latest diary's opening page. Instead of the usual property of Madison Blake Clark with practiced flourishes mimicking my signature, she'd simply written, "These are my words, my journey, my truth. No imitations needed." During a rare family dinner when Madison visited Boston, the contrast between past and present was striking. Gone was the designer wardrobe and calculated charm. Instead, she wore paint-stained jeans and spoke passionately about her students' progress. When conversation turned to my recent business success, she listened with genuine interest rather than barely concealed envy. "I owe you an apology," she told me later that evening, pulling out her current diary. "Not just for the wedding or Alex or all the schemes, but for something bigger, for trying to steal your essence instead of finding my own." She opened to a recent entry. "Today I realized success isn't about having someone else's life. It's about living your own so fully that imitation never crosses your mind." Alex squeezed my hand under the table as Madison shared her plans to expand her art therapy program. Her eyes sparkled with authentic passion rather than calculated ambition. The diary on the table wasn't a weapon or a blueprint for manipulation. It had become a genuine chronicle of personal growth. As we said goodbye, Madison hugged me without any of her old artificial warmth. "Thank you," she whispered, "for showing me that the best stories are the ones we write for ourselves." Watching her cab disappear into the Boston night, I realized that sometimes the greatest revenge isn't in exposing someone's plots. It's in helping them find their own path to redemption, one honest diary entry at a time. 3 years into Madison's transformation, an unexpected package arrived at our Boston home. Inside, I found a leather-bound album, not another diary, but a carefully curated collection of newspaper clippings, photographs, and handwritten notes documenting both our journeys. Madison had titled it "The Stories We Choose." The album began with the infamous wedding headlines, "Socialite's Wedding Disruption Backfires," and "Diary Revelations Shock Boston Elite." But as pages turned, the narrative shifted. Recent articles featured Madison's expanding art therapy program, highlighted her work with traumatized youth, and showcased the growing success of her Paris studio. "I kept every piece," she wrote in an accompanying letter, "not as a reminder of my shame, but as proof that people can change their stories." Each clipping shows two paths, the one I almost destroyed myself trying to follow and the one I finally found for myself. Alex studied the album with particular interest in the business section clippings. Side by side, they told parallel tales. My tech company's expansion alongside Madison's art therapy centers opening across Europe. "These aren't competing narratives anymore," he observed. "They're complementary chapters in different books." The most touching inclusion was a series of diary excerpts she'd chosen to share, not the obsessive schemes of before, but honest reflections on her journey. "Today I helped a teenager work through her own comparison anxiety," one entry read. As she painted her feelings, "I saw my old self in her brushstrokes, always measuring, always falling short. But now I could offer something I never had, permission to be beautifully, imperfectly original." Victoria Winchester, upon seeing the album, suggested displaying it at the upcoming Winchester Foundation Charity Gala. "This isn't just about Madison's redemption," she explained. "It's about showing others trapped in lives of comparison that there's another way." The album's later pages revealed something extraordinary: collaborative projects between Madison's art therapy program and my tech company's educational initiatives. Without either of us planning it, our paths had naturally converged in a way her previous scheming never could have achieved. "Remember how I used to track your every move?" Madison wrote. "Now my students use your educational software to document their artistic progress. Life has a strange way of writing better plots than we could ever plan." Mother wept when she saw the final page's photos of Madison's newest venture, a retreat center for women struggling with identity and self-worth issues. The location? The same French countryside estate where she'd fled after the wedding incident. She'd transformed her place of exile into a sanctuary for healing. Charlotte, now a regular guest teacher at Madison's studio, contributed her own note to the album. "I watched my best friend lose herself trying to become someone else. Now I watch her help others find themselves through art." Some stories do have happy endings, just not the ones we originally plotted. During our next family gathering, Madison presented me with a special addition to the album, a joint interview we'd given to a prominent women's magazine. The headline read, "Stepsister Rivalry to Revolutionary Partnership: How Two Women Turned Conflict into Creation." "I wanted you to have this," Madison said, carefully placing the article in the album. "Not because it's about us, but because it might help someone else stuck in the comparison trap I lived in. Every story of transformation gives permission for another to begin." Alex wrapped an arm around each of us as we flipped through the completed album. "You both wrote exactly the stories you were meant to tell," he said. "Just not in the order anyone expected." The album's final page held a simple watercolor painting, two paths starting from the same point, diverging through tumultuous terrain, then meeting again at a higher elevation. Beneath it, Madison had written, "Sometimes the longest road to finding yourself leads through someone else's life. The trick is knowing when to turn back and blaze your own trail." Looking at our collected history, I realized that revenge had never been the right ending for our story. The real conclusion wasn't in exposed diaries or public humiliation, it was in the genuine growth that followed. Madison hadn't just changed her narrative, she'd helped rewrite the ending for both of us. As we closed the album, Madison squeezed my hand. "Thank you," she said, "for giving me the wake-up call I needed to start my own story." In that moment, I understood that sometimes the best revenge is simply living well enough to inspire your former enemy to do the same. The story came full circle during the 5th anniversary celebration of Madison's first art therapy center. The event, held in a renovated Parisian warehouse, drew an unexpected mix of guests. Boston socialites mingled with art students, tech entrepreneurs chatted with therapy clients, and family members once divided by Madison's schemes, united in celebration of her genuine success. In the center of the main gallery hung a striking installation. Madison's old diaries, transformed into origami cranes, suspended from the ceiling in a spiraling pattern. Each diary page visible through the delicate folds showed fragments of her journey, from obsession to liberation, from imitation to authenticity. I wanted them here, Madison explained to the gathered crowd, because every story of healing begins with acknowledging our past chapters. These diaries once documented my attempts to steal someone else's life. Now they float above us, transformed into symbols of flight and freedom. Alex and I watched as she guided visitors through the exhibition. Her newest diary entries, enlarged and displayed alongside student artwork, revealed the depth of her transformation. Today's breakthrough came from an unexpected source. One read. A client asked why I stopped keeping revenge journals. I realized I don't need them anymore. Living authentically is the best revenge against your former self. Victoria Winchester, now a devoted patron of the arts therapy program, stood before a particularly powerful piece, a collaborative mural created by Madison's students, each section depicting their own journeys from imitation to authenticity. You've done more than find yourself, she told Madison. You've created a path for others to do the same. The evening's centerpiece was the unveiling of a joint venture between our companies, a digital platform combining my educational technology with Madison's art therapy techniques. The project, born from our shared experiences, would help others trapped in cycles of comparison and self-doubt. 5 years ago, Madison addressed the audience. I stood in a cathedral, trying to steal my stepsister's happiness. Today I stand before you having found something far more valuable, my own path. And the woman I once tried to replace? She's now my strongest ally in helping others find their authentic voices. Mother, watching from the front row, dabbed at her eyes as Madison continued. These diary pages once mapped my obsession with someone else's life. Now they're reminders that the most beautiful stories are the ones we write for ourselves, not the ones we try to copy from others. Charlotte, who had supported Madison's transformation from the beginning, unveiled a surprise. A bound collection of success stories from the Art Therapy Center's first 5 years. From Madison, I learned that true friendship isn't about keeping secrets, she said. It's about helping each other discover our own truths. The evening concluded with a symbolic ceremony. Madison invited each guest to write down something they needed to release. A comparison, a jealousy, an imitation of someone else's life. One by one, these notes were folded into paper boats and set afloat in the courtyard fountain, carrying away old patterns to make room for authentic stories. As the last paper boat drifted across the water, Madison turned to me. Do you remember what you said at your wedding when I tried to stop it? I've been waiting for this moment. You knew even then that exposure wasn't about revenge. It was about forcing me to finally see myself. Alex joined us by the fountain, where the paper boats had gathered in a gentle constellation of released burdens. Both of you wrote exactly the stories you were meant to tell, he observed. Just not in the order anyone expected. Looking at the transformed diary pages floating above us and the healing ripples spreading through the fountain below, I realized our story had evolved into something neither of us could have planned. Madison hadn't just reformed, she'd revolutionized her pain into purpose, turning her cautionary tale into a beacon of hope for others. The best revenge, Madison wrote in her latest diary entry, displayed prominently by the exit, isn't in exposing someone's darkness. It's in helping them find their light. Eve didn't just stop my wedding disruption, she started my journey home to myself. Sometimes the people we try to destroy become the ones who save us from our own destructive stories. As guests departed into the Parisian night, carrying pieces of transformed wisdom with them, Madison and I stood together under her canopy of origami cranes. Each diary page-turned wing caught the light differently, casting shadows that danced like the complex patterns of human growth and redemption. Ready to write the next chapter? I asked her. Madison smiled, touching one of the floating cranes. Yes, she replied. But this time I'm writing it in my own voice. The 6th year marked a new chapter when Madison discovered an old USB drive while cleaning her Paris studio. It contained something unexpected. Video diaries from the months leading up to my wedding. Watching them transformed our understanding of her journey in ways the written diaries never could. Day 89 before the wedding, Madison's younger self spoke to the camera, rehearsing her planned disruption with almost theatrical precision. The key is to make the tears look natural. Eve always had that perfect vulnerable look. The one that got her everything. Today I practiced for 6 hours in front of the mirror. The videos progressively revealed a descent we hadn't fully grasped from her written words alone. Hours of footage showed her practicing my mannerisms, mimicking my speech patterns, even attempting to copy my business presentation style. The obsession had been more complete than anyone realized. Found another video, she wrote in her current diary. I was trying to replicate Eve's TED Talk gestures. Watching it now feels like witnessing a stranger's breakdown. The scariest part? I thought I was being strategic. I didn't realize I was erasing myself. Alex and I sat with Madison in her therapy studio, viewing selected clips she felt ready to share. The most haunting was dated the night before our wedding. Madison, dressed in her red dress, delivering her planned speech to an empty room, over and over until dawn broke. I needed you both to see these, Madison explained, her hands steady as she closed the laptop. Not for more apologies, but because these videos are becoming part of our therapy program. Watching myself lose myself. It's helping others recognize their own patterns of identity loss. Victoria Winchester, upon viewing portions of the footage, proposed something unprecedented. A documentary about transformation. Not focused on the scandal but on the deeper journey from obsession to authenticity. These videos aren't just about Madison anymore, she observed. They're about everyone who's ever tried to live someone else's life. The documentary project unveiled layers we hadn't expected. Former society friends came forward with their own stories of pretense and performance. Charlotte revealed footage she'd shot of Madison during their college years, showing early signs of her identity struggle. Looking at these old videos, Madison wrote in her latest diary entry, I realize my greatest performance wasn't at Eve's wedding. It was every day before that, pretending I didn't need to find my own path. The red dress moment wasn't my breakdown, it was my breakthrough. Mother found it difficult to watch the footage at first, seeing the depth of Madison's struggle displayed so rawly. But during a private screening of the documentary Rough Cut, she grasped her daughter's vision. You're not just exposing your past, she told Madison. You're illuminating a path for others. The most powerful segment featured split-screen comparisons. Madison's practiced imitations beside footage of her current art therapy sessions. The contrast between her former rehearsed perfection and present authentic passion told the story better than words ever could. During the documentary's final editing sessions, Madison added something unexpected, recent video diaries showing her work with clients. Today we don't practice being perfect, she told a group of young women. We practice being present, being real, being ourselves. Alex, watching the final cut, noted how the story had evolved beyond revenge or redemption. This isn't just about what happened at our wedding anymore, he reflected. It's about the universal struggle between authenticity and imitation. The documentary premiered at Madison's Art Therapy Center, where the origami crane installation still danced overhead. But now, projected on the walls behind the paper birds, ran loops of Madison's transformation, from the practiced tears of her wedding planning to the genuine joy of her current work. These videos were my last masks, Madison addressed the premiere audience. I kept them hidden because I thought they showed my weakness. Now I understand they show something more valuable. They show that change is possible. That no matter how lost you become in someone else's story, you can always find your way back to your own. As the credits rolled, Madison opened her current diary and read her latest entry. The cameras caught my performance, but they also captured my liberation. Every practiced smile, every rehearsed word was a step toward the moment I finally became real. Sometimes you have to see yourself at your most inauthentic to find your truest self. The evening ended with Madison unveiling her newest project, a video diary workshop where clients could document their own journeys from imitation to authenticity. Because sometimes, she explained, You need to watch yourself disappear before you can find your way back. Looking at the frozen frames of Madison's past self practicing her wedding disruption, contrasted with the confident woman now helping others heal, I realized that even the darkest documentation of obsession could become a powerful tool for transformation. Her video diaries, like the written ones before them, had evolved from weapons into wisdom. 7 years after the wedding, Madison's documentary unexpectedly went viral. The story resonated far beyond our family circle, touching millions who recognized their own struggles with authenticity in her journey. But it was a simple leather-bound book arriving at our Boston home that marked the true culmination of our story. Final pages read the embossed cover. Inside, Madison had handwritten her last diary entry alongside photographs documenting every phase of our shared history. The entry began, "Dear Eve, this is the last diary I'll ever write about you because it's time to close this chapter completely." The pages that followed weren't filled with her usual introspection or therapy insights. Instead, Madison had compiled letters from people whose lives had been touched by our story. Women who'd abandoned their own wedding-crashing plans, students who'd stopped measuring themselves against others' success, and therapy clients who'd found their authentic voices. "Your revenge wasn't in exposing my diary at the wedding," Madison wrote. "It was in forcing me to finally read my own words and see what I'd become. Now others are reading their own stories differently because of what happened that day." Alex found me in our library, tears falling onto the final pages. "She's really done it, hasn't she?" he said softly. "She's turned your moment of revenge into a movement of redemption." Victoria Winchester had already received her copy of the book. Her note to Madison, included in the final pages, read, "You've proven that true grace isn't in hiding our darkest chapters, but in transforming them into light for others." The most powerful inclusion was a photograph taken moments after my wedding confrontation, Madison in her red dress, mascara streaking her cheeks, holding the exposed diary. Beside it, a recent photo showed her in her art therapy studio, surrounded by clients writing their own stories of transformation. The caption read, "Sometimes our worst moments become our best teachers." Mother's contribution to the final pages surprised us all. She'd kept a diary of her own during those tumultuous years. Her entries revealed the pain of watching one daughter try to become the other, and the joy of finally seeing both living authentically. "My greatest failure," she wrote, "was in not showing Madison that she was enough exactly as she was." Charlotte contributed the last photograph, a candid shot of Madison and me at her therapy center's opening, both laughing at something long forgotten. "This," she wrote beneath it, "is what happens when we stop trying to steal stories and start writing our own." The book's final entry came with an unexpected proposal. Madison had designed a new program combining her art therapy with my tech company's resources. Written in Light, a platform helping people document their journeys from imitation to authenticity. She wanted us to launch it together, transforming our past conflict into future collaboration. "7 years ago I tried to steal your happy ending," Madison concluded. "Instead you gave me something better, the courage to write my own. This diary isn't an ending at all. It's an invitation to others to start their own stories." Alex found me still reading in the early hours of morning. "You know what's remarkable?" he observed. "Your revenge could have destroyed her. Instead it gave her and now countless others a new beginning." The next day I sent Madison my response, not in a diary but in a simple note. "Let's write this next chapter together." Looking at her final diary in our library, now shelved alongside the ones that once documented her obsession, I realized that revenge had never been the end goal. The real story wasn't in the wedding confrontation or even in Madison's transformation. It was in how a single moment of truth could ripple outward, touching lives we'd never even imagined. Madison's last written words captured it perfectly. "In trying to become my stepsister, I lost myself. In failing to steal her story, I found my own." Sometimes the greatest plot twist isn't in what we take from others, but in what we finally give ourselves permission to become. And so our story, which began with a wedding disruption and a revealed diary, evolved into something far more powerful than revenge. It became a beacon for others looking to find their own voice, their own path, their own authentic tale to tell. Perhaps that's the most unexpected twist of all. Sometimes the best revenge isn't in destroying someone's story, but in helping them write a better one.